Well, Ann Rao, this is one of the operations and one of the ways that the Florida Citrus Hall of Fame is trying to tell the story of Florida citrus. Florida Citrus Hall of Fame has two purposes. One is to recognize individuals, and this is the other one. So we're videoing and talking to people. Before we get started, we have to tell everybody who we are because the guy making the video wants to be sure he's got everything right. So I'll do first. My name is John Jackson, John Jackson, and this is
Ann Huffstetler Rao, and the Huffstetler is Huffstetler, and the Rao is ROU.
All right. Now, Ann, we have a bunch of videos already done. Mm-hmm. And the videos have been with production managers, pesticide, fertilizer salesmen, CEOs. Today, we want to talk about what it was like for someone who was involved in the citrus industry, from growing up in it, having a husband who was in it, but you were not in the office every day. You were not, but you people need to understand that since citrus was so integral to the communities, even more so with you as it being a part of your family. So I want to start, and I want to talk a little bit about what it was like for a young girl and a teenager growing up in a citrus family and having a father that was actively involved in it. So what are your recollections?
What are my recollections?
Yeah.
Well, citrus was always huge in our family. And from really early times, the first thing probably I remember is that my father, Leslie Huffstetler, during packing season was never home. Because they would run until late at night, all through before Christmas, mm-hmm. before the embargo. But he was very much of a family man. So whenever he was home, we all enjoyed so much doing things together. And he made sure that we had fresh orange juice every morning. He made sure of that. He and Mother were a wonderful team. She took care of the family, the house, even though Daddy was known to do some cooking and always helped her, but they were a wonderful team.
Well, other people involved in the citrus were just like your dad, were involved in produce or selling or so forth, and citrus seems to have a magnet because of the volume and everything else. So mm-hmm. So when he was in high school, though, he was marketing strawberries?
Oh, yes. Daddy, in fact, he was head of the strawberry co-op up there. And a friend of ours who grew up in Maryville said to me one day, Ann, when I was little, your dad would let us go out and pick strawberries. And one day he said to me, Joe, how many strawberries have you picked? And he said, well, this many. And he said, well, it looks like you've eaten a lot of them.
That's right.
So anyway, Daddy moved down here in 1926. And he had a job with Eustis, which is it fruit? Did we ever decide?
Eustis Packing.
Eustis Packing.
Yeah, I think they were Eustis Packing then.
And what happened was he came in the summer, and of course there was no fresh fruit because at that time that was the only market for fruit, that and juice. Yeah. So they said the only job we have for you is to work in the groves, and he was no stranger to farming, and so it was a great opportunity for him to learn so much about production. So he worked at Eustis Packing.
And he was a bookkeeper. So he understood the financial side of it.
Daddy was he was a financial genius. We always brag about our parents, but he really understood the financial side. And his first boss was Charles Conklin. Now I don't think that he owned it. I think he ran it. I'm not sure.
I think he did, and Joe Eichelberger ran Eustis Packing for a while as well. These things kind of get intertwined, people get intertwined. But before we go there,
okay,
now we want to go back
to what it's like to be a child.
Yeah, I was reading and doing my studying, and the Umatilla Fruit Company had a big packing house in Umatilla, and on the off season, on Friday night, they would let the kids from school come in and roller skate upstairs. Now that was where they put all the boxes together. So I guess they would open it up, and I guess they had to cover the hole where the boxes went down to the packing floor.
Yes.
But you remember playing in the packing house?
Oh yes, absolutely. I remember playing in the packing house. My mother doesn't know many of these things, but when you talk about the box loft, and I remember mostly after Daddy had bought the Eustis Packing Company and changed it to L.R. Hostetler, I remember that more. I'd have free reign of the packing house, and I would go to the box loft. I knew everybody. I would pack fruit, with the packers. I'd do a pretty good pack. I learned a lot. And Daddy would just, every so often he'd come out and see me, but I was perfectly at home there.
So you didn't have video games. We didn't play video games and all that. So
No.
this was not only an opportunity for you to help out in the business, but it had to have been just an adventure, exploring, learning, meeting people. How fantastic.
It was fantastic. And I really got to know the people, the men that worked in the box loft, and the packers. And then, I got to go sometime on the grading belt. So yes, I really knew them. And I'm not sure how much help I was. You said sometime it was helpful, but I'm not real sure about that.
Well, Ann, I know that the majority of the people who are going to be watching this and following us with our crate label trail have no concept of the role that the Citrus Packing House played in the community in Lake County. Because back then, we were an agrarian society, and farming was it, and citrus was the farming operation that took place here. And
Right.
in the communities, the primary employer was the packing house. And so I would imagine that a lot of your friends' mothers worked in the packing house. A lot of your friends' fathers were either in packing house, in the groves, looking after the groves and doing things like this. They were tied directly to citrus.
Directly to citrus.
And if they weren't, Bob Bronson's Hardware down here, 80% of his customers were tied to the citrus industry in some way.
Absolutely.
And Smoky Cash's gas station the same way. It was so the packing house that your dad had was the kind of the foundation of the economy in Eustis, and there were other packing houses.
Other packing houses too, but yes, they were. And the people that worked there, I can't remember really any of my friends' families that worked there, but when Daddy came down to Eustis, he brought many members of his family.
Okay.
And my cousin, Ferris Carpenter, was his mechanic. My cousin, Jean Carpenter, who was Ferris's wife, she was his bookkeeper. The buyers that he had were married to my aunts. There was Bill Carver and Ed Carver, and of course Dougal Bowie. And so they were all related. But Dougal and Harry Bales and Stu Welch from Umatilla. They were with Daddy for a long time, and I knew their children. Sometime we'd all be together playing at the packing house. But yes, it was an integral part of life here. When it was a good year for the packing house, it was a good year for people that lived in this area. Mm-hmm. And all of the services, like what you say, Bob Bronson, of course, the fertilizer companies and all of that, yeah.
It's just was all tied together. It was interesting how you talk about family, and I digress a little bit, but my father didn't really share a whole lot with me, which I think is unfortunate. That's why I want to make sure that families know what happened. But his uncle was a packer in Pinellas County, John S. Taylor. And so I was reading a little bit about Uncle John. And so my grandfather, a brother-in-law, was pick and haul. He had the mules and he did that. Another brother-in-law was the mechanic, another brother. And so this is the same thing. The families are involved. But Ann, to me, one of the real secrets with successful operations like your dad was that the family went beyond the blood relatives. Your father treated everybody in that packing house like they were family.
He did.
And so I guarantee you that people stayed and worked, not because they made a pretty good living. It's not because of those. It was the fact that they were part of and knew that they were a key part of the business because the boss said, we're all working together. You're not working for me, you're working with me. And I'm sure that that's how those people felt. And back then, people didn't leave and move around.
No, they didn't. They had the people that worked for Daddy were, like you said, they worked with him. And he had come from very humble beginnings. And people were loyal to him because they knew that he would do anything that he could for them. Mm-hmm. I don't know whether we might not want to use this or not, but once in a while, someone would end up in the Lake County Jail.
Sure.
And I can remember going with Daddy and Mother over to Tavares late at night, and Daddy would, bail that person out. But then just other things too. When they needed money, Daddy was a very generous person. And I think at this point that I should say, my parents were dedicated Christians, and that just came through everything that they did. And I remember this story that when a man came with fruit, and he was trucking the fruit into the packing house, and Daddy said, "Come on and let me help you with that." And the man said to him later, "I don't really know who you are, Mr. Hostetler, but I know that you're a Christian." So that, that throughout the whole time of Citrus, with the ups and downs, that was the thing that I remembered the most from my parents, was their faith.
He treated everybody like he wanted to be treated.
He did.
I think that was it. Love your neighbor as yourself. So the foundation was there. So, we have a foundation, an economic foundation, but we also have this moral foundation, this thing of treating people fairly. I'm sure that your father was not after the last dollar he could get. Your father was after making sure that everything was done fairly, people were treated correctly, and so forth. And the result was that when fruit left your dad's packing house, quality fruit left, and the buyers knew, that fruit's from L.R. Hostetler, that guy sends good fruit.
Yes.
And that's going to be the segue into our next chapter in your life.
Okay.
So your dad, successful packer in the business, and all of a sudden, how did this guy Jennings Rao enter into your life?
How did he enter in my life? Well, my husband, always does what his mother tells him to do.
Oh.
All right. So when he was 23, he had volunteered for the Air Force when he was a freshman up at the University of Florida. He was not really serious about his studies, and that was the time to do it. So a group of his fraternity brothers went down and signed up. So he was stationed in England for 2.5 years. And when he came back, his mother, his father, his brother, his cousins just couldn't stand it. He was 23 and not married.
Uh-oh.
They were all married.
Yeah.
Some of them had children. So they got him dates with anybody they could think of. And so I met his mother, Martha Rao, at a Coke party. Now at that time, that was 1958. And at that time, there were Coke parties. We had a debutante ball here in Eustis that was sponsored by the Women's Club. And my mother and also Martha Rao were members. So I met her, and she called up Jennings, who was at Florida Southern at that time, and said, there's this real cute girl in Eustis that I'd like for you to meet. Well, at the time I was 17, so, but he called me, and we set up a blind date, and his brother and sister-in-law were with us. And I knew his sister-in-law, Linda Rao, had been Linda Slayton, and her father had been the Eustis Elementary principal for many, many years. So my parents thought, this is fine. So, but prior to that, we met. We met at a dance at the Eustis Women's Club that had to do with the debutante ball. It was a tea dance. And it was just love at first sight. I just fell head over heels. And that night, he went back to Florida Southern, and he was a Pike. He was in the fraternity house, and he told his roommate that he met the girl that he wanted to marry. So that's how we met. And as it turned out, he had a strong citrus background. His grandparents lived in Weirsdale. His grandfather had been a Presbyterian minister at Leesburg first and at over in Weirsdale. And when he moved to Florida, his great-grandfather sent, I wish I could remember how he described it, but anyway, it was a team of horses to help him set an orange grove. So his grandfather was in poor health, and that's why he came from Florida, from Pennsylvania. But he died in his mid-50s. But his grandmother kept right on with that grove. And in fact, there were 2 groves. One was called Hilltop, which a lot of people in Weirsdale would know that. And then there was another one that was close to Grandma Albright's house. So he had grown up in that time and played in the groves with his cousins and his brother. It's amazing that they actually lived through it, because they would find like old dynamite up in the barn and throw it out just to see if it still worked.
Yeah.
It did work, but thankfully.
Catching rattlesnakes.
Catching rattlesnakes and having a great time.
So Jennings' grandmother was an Albright?
She was an Albright, yes.
Oh, now I know the name and the family. In fact, one of the Albrights lived 2 houses down from us in Lancaster Park. I think it was George.
It was George. That was his cousin.
Okay.
That was his uncle. That was Uncle George and Aunt Judy.
Okay.
They were the older couple, right?
Yeah, my mother would go out with Mrs. Albright. They would go to Weirsdale, and the thing mother was so excited about was that they would go and their little gathering, and they would eat soft-shell crabs, which you could get from Lake George and around there. Oh, and soft-shell blue crabs, fantastic.
That was such a neat thing. The first time that I met Jennings' extended family was up at Uncle George and Aunt Judy's place on Lake George. And it was a crab feast. And you know, I'd never eaten crabs, and I walked in and there's newspapers on all the tables and big bowls of crabs, and I said to Jennings, I don't have the faintest idea how to get into one of these, so he had to show me. His folks also had a place up on Lake George, but yeah, crabs, they would have loved that. What an interesting coincidence, yeah.
And I love crabs. And we used to have in the church here, the group that it's about the same thing. And Roger and Richard and Paul with Blake was Ann's age anyway. And we would get together periodically, and one of the big deals was that we would get crabs up at Hall's at Astor. And,
how well I know Hall's,
yes.
Yeah.
So it was just kind of fascinating, all the intertwine. So Jennings now is madly in love with you, and
well, I guess the feeling was mutual.
So he got a degree in business and citrus, right?
Yes, which of course that course was charted before I met him. He had, like I told you, he had been at Gainesville at the University of Florida, but left to join the Air Force. And so when he came back, he had taken courses while he was in the service, so he could apply those to Florida Southern. And you know his history at Florida Southern. When our daughter Jennifer, now Jennifer Woodbury, when she graduated, she was the 8th member of his family to graduate from there.
It's I have a son who graduated from Florida Southern.
Yes.
And it's a fabulous school. They still offer a citrus program.
Yes.
And many of my friends who have graduated through there point out to me that they still have a program going at Southern. The one in Gainesville is kind of fallen apart a little bit, but so
there was a little competition there.
Yeah.
The Florida Southern Citrus
Exactly.
Department and the University of Florida. But you knew so many of those people. I mean, you know, I think when I think of the citrus industry with Daddy and with Jennings, it was the friendships that they had, and actually it was almost like a fraternity. I mean, they would help the other one out.
Yeah, there were no secrets.
There were no secrets.
You got a problem? Here's what I did, you know, and I tried this, and that worked. Yeah, well, I think I'll do that, and it was give and take, back and forth, and
it was give and take, and it was like in the groves. There weren't fences. It was like, well, that was Les's last row, and you know, and then whoever was his neighbor in that case, you know, they knew that. I don't remember any real problems between citrus growers. They were a very unified, loyal group.
Sometimes there were some honest mistakes, really, that took place where you would send someone out to harvest a crop, and they misunderstood the directions, and by the time the foreman got out there, they'd pick 5 or 6 rows of the neighbor's fruit.
Absolutely, but I can attest to that.
But we'd mention, I'm sorry, we got in the wrong grove. The harvester got in there. We picked 87 of your boxes, you know, and what do you want us to do with them? Well, just run them through your house, you know, with the rest of the fruit. And those kind of things. Those kind of things.
One time when Jennings, we had groves out in Grand Island, and usually how he named a grove was from who he bought it from. So maybe I won't mention names, but the man that he had bought it from, it was Daddy's grove, and Jennings sent a crew out there to pick it. And the man who owned it was already in there picking it. Now when I say there wasn't any ruffles, that was because this was not, it wasn't a friendly relationship.
Yeah, sometimes mistakes aren't really mistakes. So Jennings graduates from Southern, and does he go to work immediately with your dad in the packing house?
No, he went into insurance. Now, your neighbor in Lancaster Park, George, his Uncle George, he was vice president of the National Standard Insurance Company in Orlando. And so also Jennings had an uncle who was an executive with Prudential.
Well, that's right. You all lived in Orlando, didn't you?
We did. And so he had to decide if we was going to go with Uncle George and we live in Orlando, or if he was going to go with Uncle Donald and we moved to Jacksonville. So he went to work for Uncle George. And the first year we were married, we lived in Orlando, and he worked with his cousin, George Sr.'s son, George Jr., and with his brother, Mike. They were all in insurance together. And it was weekly debits. It was an insurance company that that had a pretty low, dealt with a low income type of person, but they needed insurance, and so they really offered a service to them. Jennings sometimes offered too big of a service because his customers that he would go to, they would tell him their sad story and that they couldn't pay that week, and so he paid a lot of people's insurance. But then we decided after about a year, Daddy was talking about retiring. He retired pretty young. He retired in his 60s. And
That's not young. I retired in my 60s.
Well, yeah, but sometime, I mean, Jennings, goodness, I don't think he really retired until way up in his 70s. But, and my brother, who I've left out completely, my brother Bob was 6 years older than I. And of course, he and Jennings were friends. And it was decided, of course, that he would go into citrus. He graduated from Stetson. And so he was in citrus, as well was Joe McCree by that time was working for Daddy. And so Jennings, you know, Daddy talked to him and he decided that he wanted to get into citrus and work for Daddy, which he did. And then at that point, Daddy hadn't retired yet, but later on at that point, when Daddy retired, Jennings decided that he wanted to buy out L.R. Huffstetler Incorporated. And Bob had already decided that he wanted to go into law. He wanted to get his law degree. So he and his family moved to Gainesville and he got his law degree. And he had an excellent career in law besides private practice. He was
a judge.
County judge in Lake County. Then there was an opening on the bench down in Hernando County, and so he became the circuit judge down there. And Jennings took over the citrus.
Now, your father had the big packing house, Eustis Packing, and then he built a smaller house for tangerines. And
yes.
So your dad sold the big house to Dougal, Stewart, and Howard, right?
Yes.
And Jennings bought the smaller house.
He did. He bought the smaller house.
So you still were in the packing business. There were still long nights before Christmas that Daddy never showed up until late.
Oh, yes.
And there was always the challenge of Jennings and I interacted all the time anyway.
Right.
But Jennings used to tell me, he said, you know, whenever we have a crop that's got a lot of big size fruit, the buyers want small fruit. When we have small fruit, the buyers want big fruit. No matter what, you know, it was a challenge, and folks have to understand that running a packing house, to me, was as much an art, if not more of an art, than it was a science. And the one thing that Jennings had was that he had an old packing house, and he didn't have all the most modern equipment,
right.
but Jennings had very little debt. And Jennings knew how to run the packing house, and somehow Jennings inherited that same trait that your dad had, that when it leaves this house, it's going to be top quality fruit.
Absolutely.
And that goes back to labels, and you and I are working on a project with crate labels and everything,
yes.
and how the rainbow label has stayed in the family. And early on, when your dad was involved with the Harris Wade packing house,
right,
rainbow label emerged. And was that your dad's label to start with, or did
You
that
know,
come with the packing house, or do you know?
I really don't know.
Yeah.
I really don't know. And I don't know about the Chubby label, because that, was from Harrison Wade. But I think the Chubby label started at Harrison Wade. And I think the cute little blonde boy that you see was the son of Mr. Harris, Harry Harris, Skipper. I think it was Skipper Harris. But yes, there was so much pride in the label. And both Daddy and Jennings worked on the grading lines. They would go out and set the standard. I can remember Daddy working on the grading lines. I can remember Jennings working on the grading line. You had to be, for a quality product, you had to be involved with each step. Not just the fruit in the trees and how it was picked, but and how it was washed, and the
and with the grading, Ann, most people don't realize that citrus, first of all, it has to mature on the tree.
Yes.
And so we can't pick it too early. So we wait until the sugar and the acid levels are to the point where not only does it pass legal maturity,
Right.
but it's good quality fruit. But also in Florida, we have these nice, hot, warm summers that produce a lot of good quality juice and internal quality, but unfortunately, they also produce creatures like rust mites and greasy spot and things like this that would cause a blemish to the fruit. And so
Absolutely.
So now you've got a challenge. You and I know, and Jennings knew, that fruit had a little rust mite damage on it, but
Right.
inside it was great.
Right.
But the buyer, when she went to the store in Chicago, she didn't know that. So
No.
so the level that your father and Jennings went to make sure that even though they knew that tasted good,
Right.
they had it kicked out.
It had it kicked out.
Yeah.
They had it kicked out. And of course, there was a market, the juice market. And
When the juice market came along, and that was great. But
Yes.
now the juice market really didn't develop until the late 40s and early 50s. So Jennings was able to utilize the juice market. Your dad, for him, it had to be even tougher because he knew if it graded out, there was that went to a pasture. The cows.
It went to a pasture.
Yeah.
Sometime there were some people that would be interested in buying it because they also knew how good the juice was.
Yeah, and they would either juice it or they would sell it at roadside stands.
They'd have roadside
They had
stands.
customers that understood the blemish and
What it was like.
all this quality type of stuff.
But I can tell you a couple of really interesting stories. All right. So our daughter Jennifer, who is on the picture, or she's on the label Dolly, the second Dolly. I had it lined up. The photographer in Orlando, he was excellent. His name was Anderson.
Andy Anderson
Yes, he was
did our wedding pictures.
really. Oh my goodness! And
And he has a grove or has some property out in Chuliota, and we digress. We'll get back to it.
Oh, that's
but anyway,
right.
So I went out to look at his property, and he told me that he was retiring, and that all of his pictures were available if you wanted to buy them, and all the proceeds were going to the Boy Scouts or someplace like this. And
Yes.
so if I wanted to buy my old wedding pictures, he had all the negatives and all that stuff there. So anyway,
That's fabulous.
But
he was the top.
he was the top.
He was the top. So I had Jennifer, she was all dressed up in this little yellow dress, but I didn't have an orange. So I went by my mother's house, and we always had a big bowl of oranges. And so I just picked one, and it had rust mite. But I thought, oh, Mr. Anderson, he'll be able to fix that. So when I came in, he said, Ann, I'm so sorry, but the type of photo that I have to take, which is called a transparency, I can't touch it up. So that has been an interesting story, because here on this label is a piece of fruit with rust mite. And then I guess to say also about their brands, Jennings, one time when we were in New York City, he went to the auction, which was where most of his fruit was sold at that time, the New York City auction. But it became pretty corrupt. And I remember that when he went, we couldn't go because it was in a dangerous part of town. And that's kind of a digression. It was interesting for him to see it. But his Rainbow brand mostly sold for fruit baskets at the Waldorf Astoria. So that's the proof of quality. Yes.
Good quality fruit. Well, you know, and I found that the growers and the people involved in the industry, we talked before, like they would share it and there were no secrets, but also they were willing to serve and to help the industry. So let's talk a little bit about Jennings and his role. He was a director with FOM. Now, FOM was a marketing entity that basically acquired fruit that Minute Maid would use to juice. And so this Florida Orange Marketers was an intermediate handler that would send juice to Minute Maid. And
right.
Jennings got involved with FOM.
Well, actually, Daddy first got involved in it. And I didn't go over the dates, but I think it was Daddy wasn't on the first board, but he was the second year of Florida Orange Marketers. And yes, they were the grower arm for Minute Maid. And again, they were a very cohesive group. They were, I remember Slim Haywood from Tavares. He was one of the growers. And of course, Ed Squire was the manager for years.
Did Ed live in Eustis?
He lived in Eustis.
Kind of across the street from where Mr. Flippo lived, back in that
area.
Yeah.
Ed's wife, Ruth, wonderful, wonderful lady. She's 101.
Oh, really?
And I think she still lives there. Uh-huh. And I remember Jennings and I bringing Ruth to one of the FOM meetings where Ed was being honored posthumously. He had passed away, but he was huge in the success of FOM. So I would go to the meetings when with Daddy, and Jennings, of course, was a grower member, and so Jennings became a board of director member for many years, and then he served as chairman of the board, and then chairman of the board emeritus. So he was very involved with Florida Orange Marketers.
Well, Jennings had a remarkable challenge because when he was president, we had the freezes, right? I mean,
absolutely.
And so there was very little fruit to be had, and these juice plants still needed to run. So, I mean, somehow we had to encourage non-members to join FOM. And
absolutely. There was a lot.
But, you know, in the way he did that, I don't know this, but I'm just guessing, is the way that he did that, all he had to do was show how effective and how great the returns and the quality of the program had been.
Right.
So this wasn't like you were trying to sell a beat-up old rundown mule.
No.
You were selling a thoroughbred racehorse. And
absolutely.
It was a lot easier to do that than try to get people to join into an organization that didn't have a very good track record.
That didn't have a very good track record. And yes, Minute Maid they were the leader in the industry. But yes, under his time, it was difficult. And probably I ought to talk a little bit about the freezes because they certainly impacted our home life. Me both as a child and then after Jennings and I were married and were raising our own family. I can remember on cold nights with my parents, and like I told you, they were deeply committed Christians. And I can just remember how they had a certain place. We had a 2-story house right here on Center Street, and it had a landing, and that's where they would pray on a cold night. And Daddy also would ride the groves, and you know all about that because you had that wonderful service in later years that you would give the temperatures in all parts of the county and the extended area of what, how cold it was at a certain time. But any citrus grower would know. They would be out on the road checking the thermometers they had in their groves. I remember our second child, whose name was Jennings III, he was born on December the 29th, which was a very cold time. And I remember Daddy a few weeks earlier. When was that freeze? Let me think. It was a 62 freeze.
62 freeze. That was December the 13th.
The 13th, that's what I was thinking. The night of December the 13th, Daddy was driving the groves, and so was Jennings. So I remember him coming to the house, and we lived in an old farmhouse, and we had those jalousies that rolled up, and my daddy was so worried that I was getting cold. So he came out because he was really concerned about me. So yes, it played such a part in the life of any citrus family. And with Jennings, we could also fire the groves. And at that time, you could use anything. He owned a grove in Chileota, which we did call the icebox because Chileota was cold. And I remember they just took tires. At that time, they could burn tires. And they just took tires over there and spread them out among the rows. And he couldn't get that smell, that burnt rubber smell off of himself for a long time. But it was just a part of life.
It was.
Yeah.
And you have to understand, if you're your dad in the packing house, that the most important thing for him is how much damage was really done to the crop.
Right.
And so he's out there at 5 o'clock in the morning cutting fruit. To see how much freeze damage. Is it just in the top quarter? Did it go down, Because if you're going to ship quality fruit, you can ship fruit that was damaged by the cold for maybe a week or two. But once it starts to hit the ground and dry out, then, its value has gone away. And so
that was it.
So now he's in a really difficult situation. How much damage do we had? How are we going to get this fruit in? When do I quit shipping fruit?
Right.
How do I get it diverted to the processing plant? So he's got to pick the best groves where he can get fresh fruit. The rest of it has to go in. Getting picking crews. Freezes were just...
They were massive problem.
Yeah, you could have a rust mites, or you could have fertilizer, and you could ponder that. But I think we need to probably spray later this week, or let's put the fertilizer out next week on a freeze. We got to make a decision now. What's going to happen tonight? Do I light those tires tonight? If I got heaters, do I crank them up at midnight knowing they're going to run out of fuel at 7 in the morning?
That was it. Because if they ran out of fuel, then it was lost.
Yeah, that was the coldest time.
That was the coldest time. So you had to have a generator, which Daddy didn't have back in that time. But you had to know what the temperature had gotten to if you could. But then in the early days, it was mostly from cutting that fruit and from knowing your locations, which was the warmest location.
They had thermometers, and so they, and the National Weather Service had special shelters that had a recording thermometer.
Right.
So your dad didn't have to read every hour, but he knew the shelter in Tavares or the shelter in Umatilla, where it was, they were 8 hours under 28 degrees, and he had cut ice. And based upon his experience, he knew just how bad it was and what was going to happen.
It was. Yeah.
Well, didn't the 62 freeze kind of motivate your brother to decide maybe he would move out of the citrus business into the law business?
I think that had quite a bit to do with it. Yeah, I think that it did.
It's a trying time. It's difficult.
It was a very trying time, and unless you I have to think about the aftermath of it. Once we knew what had happened, and then there was a lot of tree damage, fruit yes, but then there was actually wood damage. So we lived in a grove, and I can just remember the saws just going all day, and Jennings did a lot of that. And you'd have to know exactly where to cut to. And what was that? It was, you were looking for something bulb. Do you remember what that was? Because I can remember driving the groves with Daddy, but more with Jennings. And we would be looking for where there'd be a little green, and so that was where it was dead to. So then the next week we'd ride the same grove, and that bulb, that bit of green, would be gone.
Yeah, the problem was that growers were way too anxious to prune their groves.
To prune.
And so they would prune, and they hadn't pruned back. Like you said, the canker or the cold sore would be there, and you'd think, oh, that's where it is. But then, like you said, then you come back 2 or 3 weeks later, and now you see it's moved on down the tree.
Right.
The thing in '62 was that we had really big trees then. Pruning was not a very common practice.
Right.
So in '62, we pruned the trees not because the pickers demanded it, but we pruned the trees because there was so much dead wood.
Dead wood.
And then what happened, Ann, I don't know if you remember this or not, but we pruned the trees back, and pruning is an extremely rejuvenating process. When you cut a limb, a live limb, now
Right.
you cut it, it produces a lot of growth on there.
Yes.
So we lost a crop in '62. We pruned the trees heavily in '63. And in '66, '67, we had a 40% increase in production, and we had an oversupply of fruit.
Oversupply, yes.
Because we had rejuvenated the trees. But we went into a whole new mode. Now we prune trees and we shape them so we can get them picked. But we need to move forward, because if '62 was bad, the '80s were life-changing.
Life-changing. And probably the '83 freeze, we knew how bad it was, of course, but we had no idea, of course, what would happen the rest of the time. But the '83 freeze was the worst. Wouldn't you agree with that?
The '83 freeze killed trees, but we had never experienced that kind of a freeze. The last time it happened was in 1894 and 1895. There weren't many growers around. That Mr. Simpson, James Simpson, he died in '78, I think, and he was 16 when the '83, I mean '94, '95 freeze came. But anyway, so growers, based upon '62, they said we can prune these trees and they'll come back. There were a couple things. When the '83 freeze came, the trees were in a growing condition. We hadn't had any cold weather.
No cold weather.
So it killed it. You had a grove on Lakeshore Drive that survived the '94, '95 freeze.
There was a portion of that grove that survived.
It didn't make it.
It didn't.
With the '83 freeze.
No, it
didn't.
didn't.
How long did it take for Jennings to finally realize that things had changed forever? I mean,
Well,
it had to have been a very difficult time.
It was a very difficult time. I'm trying to think back, and I think about we had gone to Christmas Eve, the midnight service, 11 o'clock service at our church, First Presbyterian. And so Bill Eichelberger and Jennings, we were walking into church together, and they both were very grim. They knew it was going to be bad. So, the next day we, of course he was out all that night, And we ran microjet, but if you didn't have a generator, that was going to stop. Because I think that one of the hardest things about that freeze not only was how cold it got, but the duration of the cold. And I wish I could remember, and I've got it written down somewhere, maybe how cold it was in certain areas for.
Well, we had some single-digit temperatures reported in cold pockets all over the county, and temperatures were at my office in Tavares it was 16.
Right.
And we had I can't remember exactly, but 8 or 10 hours below 28, and 28 is a magic number for damage to the fruit.
Yes.
And
yes.
So we knew immediately that we had suffered tremendous fruit damage.
Tremendous fruit damage.
So what was happening immediately was that we need to get all the fruit in the juice plants as quick as we could.
Quick as we could.
So now here it is, rounding up harvesting crews,
yes.
picking up fruit, and
it was massive.
When do you quit picking fruit up off the ground?
Right.
When do you finally have to show the plant down? So.
Yes, it was. I remember it was massive, and Jennings worked. Long hours, of course, and I also remember that. There were times. Some people were very discouraged, but he was very optimistic. He was optimistic man.
He was.
Yes. And so it was going to come back.
I had, I dealt with growers that, the sky's falling, the world's come to an end. But there were growers like Jennings and even Jim Simpson. But Ann, I think one thing is that Jennings had a grasp of the economics and the whole situation to know that if we dealt with it, we could handle it, we could deal with it one way or the other. And I'm just guessing, and I would imagine this is true, that your family wasn't heavily leveraged in the citrus business. Debt wasn't a huge problem. The growers who really got hurt, from my observation, were the growers who were relatively new, but they were enthusiastic. And so this grove made money, so they put this grove up as collateral, and they bought another grove, and then
right.
So now they had their investment was the collateral. And spreadsheets are great, except when that little line up on the top that says income, when it goes to zero, the rest of the spreadsheet is gone. And
it's gone.
Unfortunately, those people that were dealing with debt, they lost their groves. The people who had very little debt were able to financially somehow survive.
Well, now I can say for my father, because when he retired and sold Jennings a business, of course he still had the groves, and but he was an extremely frugal man, and as was my mother, and he. Like I said earlier, he was really a financial genius. So he started investing, and he became involved early on with First State Bank, and had a lot of that stock, but he got into the stock market at that point. So he was doing very well in the stock market. Now Jennings and I were invested in citrus. We didn't have an alternate cash flow or whatever income. So I will say that we learned how to borrow money. We were really good at it. Jennings, would do, like you said, about collateral. By that time, he had some groves of his own, and he could put up the land for collateral, and the same as myself. So we did have to borrow a lot of money during that time. But thankfully, we were able to stay afloat. And if you could hold on to your groves throughout the 80s, if you could hold on to the groves, and then particularly after the 89 freeze, if you could hold on to that property, because there was a glut of property on the market, then you could do pretty well. So we just hung on as long as we could.
But and I always admired citrus growers that they always could hang on, and that was the case here. We people still were around, and I don't know if there's anything that's really going to change that, except now the industry has another problem that it's dealing with, and I thought freezes were the ultimate, to deal with, but now we have a disease that's really been decimating the citrus, and so from my personal perspective, I'm glad I got to retire when I did.
Yes.
I thought freezes were tough. It would be difficult now. They have this greening disease.
The greening is just,
and so
it's in every county in Florida.
It's all over, and it's so difficult. But
it's really difficult. We'd had other things, that were diseases, but there was a fix for them.
We survived burrowing nematode. We got Mediterranean fruit fly. All these things.
All that canker.
Yeah.
And remember, canker. You had to every truck, every car that went into a grove.
Spray.
You had to spray the tires, and sometimes a couple of groves we had ditches that were, we had some kind of I don't know what kind of liquid it was, but it was supposed to kill the canker
Then
off.
you had wash stations, these booms over it, so when the fruit trucks would come in, they would get sprayed, and people had to be sprayed.
And it was, they were resilient. Citrus people were resilient, but there had to come a time that.
Well, the kids now are enthusiastic. I've talked to some, and I think it's great. You talked about Bill Eichelberger. I had breakfast not too long ago with a guy by the name of Chuck Allison. Now, Chuck Allison grew up in Lake City in a farm, and his father died when he was 18, and his mother told Chuck, you're not staying at the farm and farming, but he loved to farm. But anyway, Chuck got a degree from Gainesville in economics and worked for Duda and worked for Prudential, but he always wanted to farm, and so he's bought Eichelberger's.
Oh, okay.
And he bought Blessie's Dairy.
All right.
Up there on 450. And the milking parlor, which, by the way, do you know why they call it a milking parlor? Catherine is a dairy person.
Yes.
And I said, why'd they call it a milking parlor? She said, well, I guess it's because that's where all the ladies used to gather. So
I love that story.
But his milking parlor is a packing place for his blueberries. And anyway, so Chuck planted a lot of Eichelberger's groves.
Yes.
And
I wondered who had done that. Mm-hmm.
And about a year ago, if he went up there, he took 50 acres of red navels on the road and cut them off at the ground.
Wow. Where was that out? 452?
On 450. Yeah, 452, right.
452.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And they were on the road, and here's an economist, and these trees, they never reach maturity because of the greening.
Right.
So he clipped them off. So I'm having breakfast with Chuck and his daughter's boyfriend, who is in the citrus business in Vero Beach.
Okay.
And so the boyfriend is talking about planting grapefruit, where he cut those 50 acres off. But we're not talking about getting out of the citrus business. We're talking about, and the boyfriend says, well, I think, that we can do this, this, and this, and you can live with greening, rather than saying, oh my gosh, greening is here, we just can't move forward. So there's an enthusiastic generation. Hopefully they'll find a way to cope with it and do that. But it's a challenge.
It's a big challenge.
But as someone growing up in citrus, it was just one challenge after another.
Oh, it was one challenge after another. But the good was wonderful. The good was driving through the groves in February and March and smelling the orange blossoms. And also knowing that you were involved in something that was good for people. It was healthy. It was a wonderful time. And talking about driving through the groves, my father never had an SUV. I don't even know if they had.
They didn't have four-wheel drive.
They didn't have,
then.
no. We would drive his car.
Yeah.
And he would have a shovel in the trunk because we would always get stuck. I can't tell you how many times. Every Sunday afternoon, that was our big outing. We'd go somewhere and have lunch after church, and then we would head out to the groves, and we did get stuck a lot. Now, Jennings, of course, by that time, we had SUVs. So I have to brag on him because he was really a good citrus man and loved it. So he could tell. We would start going through groves during the bloom, and he could tell a lot by the bloom. And I'm sure you could too, John, about how much, what your production was going to be. But then we would continue on a pretty regular basis, and he could tell by the sound of the little fruit hitting the SUV what kind of crop. I mean, not to a number, but whether this is a better crop than last year. Or I was absolutely amazed by that. Yeah.
Yeah, citrus people had this uncanny ability. Plus, he knew that in June that there was going to be a lot of drop. That normally occurred.
Right.
And so most people would be panicked with all the fruit on the ground. Jennings would say, nope, that's the way it is.
That's the way it is.
The tree sets 300,000 blossoms, and we aren't going to be able to have but 1,000 of them, set, so that a lot of the stuff is going to come on the ground.
Right. Yes, you had to be very practical and very realistic.
Observation was really important. I don't know whether the kids get out like they used to, but one of my mentors in Gainesville, Fred Lawrence, said the most important thing you can see in a citrus grove is the footprints of the owner.
Absolutely.
And so you had to get out there. You had to. The tree was going to tell you what's going on.
Absolutely, John.
And so,
yes.
But you had to know what you were looking for. Jennings could observe and see.
Yes.
And
yeah, he and Daddy would go out and together before Daddy retired. And one time, oh my goodness, they saw this huge rattlesnake that had a rabbit in its mouth. Yeah. I mean, they saw they had some close calls. And then, of course, Jennings also had some close calls. But I have to tell you this story, and it's kind of a digression in a way from what we're talking about right now. But when I think about rattlesnakes, so Jennings bought a crop, and it was, I don't know where it was in the county, but, he sent his crew out, and the foreman radioed back in and said, "There's rattlesnakes out here, Mr. Jennings. We're worried." And so Jennings went out there, and a couple other of them, and I can't tell you how many rattlesnakes they killed. Come to find out, it was called Rattlesnake Hill. Yeah. Do you know where that was?
No, there's a Rattlesnake Road in Polk County.
In Polk County, yeah.
It got to the point, too, where pickers wouldn't go into a grove unless you had it mowed and cleaned up, which I don't blame them.
I don't blame them, and of course he had no idea that was Rattlesnake Hill. But a lot of interesting stories like that. And, after the 80s, Jennings did continue with the packing house, and he had such a good reputation throughout the state that he could get fruit from down south. But that just became the haul, was too expensive. There'd be breakdowns of trucks. And so
he finally decided he had had enough fun in the citrus business.
Yeah, yes. But it was sad.
Yeah.
It was a sad time.
End of an era. So
yes.
So you and I can sit here and look back, and we're really committed to telling this story.
Yes.
We got it on tape now, and we're going to have crate labels. We're going to put some stuff together, and Ann, I've been amazed and a little disappointed.
Okay.
I'm getting history together, trying to find out, and as I go into books and history books that have been written, it's amazing how little is written about citrus and how much is devoted to other things. And that's the case. I mean, if you're writing a book on the history of Tavares,
Right.
there's something said about lake region packing, but there's
Yes.
more said about the historic buildings that were there, the women's club, the this and that, the Mount Dora. They talk about the Donley House and Lakeside Inn.
Yes.
But we don't really have the meat about the citrus business, and I'm generating some of this, and
I'm
the
just
stories.
so pleased that you are, John.
Some of the
You're
stories
keeping it
are fascinating.
alive.
Some of the stories are really fascinating.
They're fascinating.
And so-
You know, we have a Eustis. There's a history. Have you read the Eustis history book?
I haven't. I've plowed through Mount Dora.
Right.
Tavares is my next one. I've got good information from you, but I'm gonna pull it all together.
Oh,
As-
I just admire you for doing that and wish you well. Any way I can help you.
Yeah, well, and there's stories that we embedded in here, and you and I know that the first citrus experiment station in the world was here in Eustis, and you go back to a letter that Mrs. Tom Platt sent to Washington saying, "I need some help," and so Washington sends down a couple of scientists, and they get with Mr. Frank Savage out here on Grove that
Grove
your family
Street.
owned.
My brother owned that grove. Yes, he did.
He had it?
Daddy owned it, and then Bob owned it, and
They ended up with a
He sold
historic
it.
grove. That's where the original citrus breeding program took place.
Oh,
and
yes.
Orlando Tangelos and Mineolas and Sunbursts and all those evolved from that. And
Absolutely.
just a rich history. It's down here, what, a half a mile or three-quarters
half
of a
a
mile.
mile, yeah.
was the first citrus
the
experiment.
first citrus experiment station.
And by the way, we haven't found the plaque from Farron Park, but the city manager has agreed that they will make a replacement. And so,
Yes.
so what I'd like to do is I'd like to tell the story of the experiment station
Yes.
and not just dedicate a plaque to the Orlando Tangelo. So this is going to be a good thing because it's going to allow us to have a physical remembrance of a historical
Could we
event.
take a picture of the present day? I mean, there are houses there now.
Yeah.
But that'd be kind of interesting to have because you could probably hit it pretty close to where.
Oh, yeah. Before the houses were there,
Yeah.
there was a gentleman in Mount Dora named Harry Fogg.
Okay.
And Mr. Fogg came to Florida in 1915, and he came with the plant board to eradicate canker.
Okay.
And so he stayed with the plant board, and he lived to be rather old. And Mr. Fogg and Dr. Castle, Bill Castle, researcher from Lake Alfred, and I spent the day together. And we went down here, and Mr. Fogg said, well, the house was right over there. The grove was, and Dr. Castle said, well, Mr. Fogg, how do you know the house was there? He said, do you see that flame vine still growing? He said, you can't kill that.
Oh.
That was on Mr. Savage's front fence.
Oh my goodness! Wow.
And the house was here, and he had a phenomenal
Can
memory.
you
And so-
remember when
Oh, I can probably put you within 4 or 5 houses of where
it was?
and the Savage family's still in town. I mean, there's still
Yes,
Savages that
that's
are around.
so interesting that
And so
they
Mr.
are.
Savage was a grower, small grower, but his contribution was that he liked research and finding answers, and so he did that. Your father was interested in the packing house and the business itself and supporting the community.
Right.
Joe Eichelberger was the same way. R.D. Keene was here and he left. Dougal Bowie and Stewart,
Harry Bales, yes.
all of these people that were so tied together. And we're in a building right here that if it wasn't for the citrus business, it wouldn't be here.
It wouldn't be here, no.
I was involved, not as much as you have, but I would know that the Christian Education Fund got a little bit low, and Eichelbergers would put money into it. And if we had an issue here, Les Huffstetler and Harry Gaylord and Neil Hipsch would take care of it.
Yes.
And that's how it was done, and so
That was how it was done. More the early. I'm not. Of course, the building was built. The sanctuary, the original, was built in 1913 and dedicated in 1914. And I know that there were citrus people that were involved because there wasn't a floor in the sanctuary not when it was dedicated, but when they first met there. And they sat on old citrus crates. Fruit cartons.
Yeah.
So I don't too much know who those people were, but as time went on, and yes, citrus was the basis of our, I guess, the financial success.
It was the bedrock of the financial community here.
Yeah.
Well, it's been fantastic. We could go on forever.
Oh, we could, because I've got this whole box of stuff.
So we're gonna sift through that. We're gonna collect some material, but I think that people have gotten a flavor now of what it was like, being immersed in citrus, from a little girl playing in a packing house to a teenager riding with her daddy into Grove, and getting stuck was just part of it, to having a husband who was committed to citrus, to going up and down with the business. I mean, your whole life, during good times, we say, hey, this is great. During bad times, how are we going to make it? We will. And so, you kind of have lived it. I tell this story all the time, and I'm not a citrus person, and I didn't grow up in it. I was a city boy. I grew up in Orlando, and I didn't develop character on the end of a hoe handle like a lot of folks did. But I've come to love the industry and the people that are involved with it. They've adopted me, they've taken me in, and it's been my life for the last 50 years. And there's not a better group of people that anybody could have worked with and worked for. So it's been fun. I've gone through the down times with them, and
Yes.
On a cold nights, I couldn't stop the cold, but I could give them information
You
to help
could give
them deal
them
with it.
information, and that was
And
huge.
So we've gone through this, and I'm optimistic that the kids out there will find a way to live with greening. This county won't be like it was before, although there's still some rural areas. I was working with Jerry Cloud in the Grove, and you can still drive down Dewey Robbins Road, and there's thousands of acres of vacant land that was in citrus at one time.
Yes.
I don't think we're going to plant it back, but
No.
anyway. And,
I don't think it'd be planted back, but there's good enthusiasm about with the different types of citrus, but I don't think it'll ever.
No, but the kids are kind of adapting and doing it a little bit differently. Have you been to Farina's outlet?
I haven't been up there.
You have to go.
Okay.
Now,
the pandemic sort of, but
so Nick Farina was a classic example of someone who grew up in citrus. When he was a teenager, he was spraying groves.
Right.
And I think he was concerned that his kids would get into an industry that he wasn't sure where it was going. So he worked really hard. His daughter has an RN, and his son has a master's degree in architecture. But they're with mom in the citrus business now.
Yes.
And so they have decided to vertically integrate, which means they are selling directly to the consumer at their store up there.
You're right, yes.
And so they squeeze it, sell fresh squeezed orange juice. They have a greenhouse. They grow vegetables that they sell. They have a pavilion that they put on events. They have the best creamsicle in the world, so you got to get ice cream when you go up there.
Yes.
But we have families and they're doing that. Bill Baker is part of that, the Baker family, and so the kids have found a way to survive and move forward. And so now they're selling the fruit directly to the consumer. They're bringing a farmer's
It's kind of
touch.
farm to table,
Right.
like that you see so many places.
So
I think that's wonderful. I knew about the Farina, what they've been doing up there, and I want to go, but I didn't realize there was still some enthusiasm to continue.
And they're doing really well. We went to a play. I'm trying to think of how you would describe it, but it was a dinner theater type thing, and so the Farinas fixed the barbecue and the meal for us, and then a play was put on by a local group here in Eustis, and it was one of these murder mystery type things, you know. And
yes.
And it was a lot of fun. This wasn't a Broadway production, but this was a local deal, and everybody had a good time, from the participants, to the audience, to the whole thing. And what really just knocked me over was that the Farina kids, the grandkids of Nick, so 10, 12-year-olds, they are involved. They're serving, they're helping. And that is so wonderful, because when you start getting the family involved, you know, when you're down at the packing house, you know, you have an ownership in that. I mean, being there, being part of it. And so those are the kind of traditions that need to continue.
You know, as you're talking, I'm thinking back about our children, and it was the timing. Jennifer, she graduated from Florida Southern in '83, and Jennings, our son Jennings III, he was at the University of Florida during that time. And then Allison came 10 years later, but the timing of it was the 80s. And there was no future.
Well, yeah, who wants to get on a sinking ship?
No, there was no future.
Now, Jennings III, though, he talked to me. He was thinking, he had his wheels turning. How can I take this and turn it into something, you know, that could be successful? And I think he was very smart, and he realized that this was an uphill battle that he was not going to be able to.
At the time, it couldn't be. So he went into banking, and he's got his grandfather's mind for financing, or for finances. And now he has his own company where he can go into companies that are in financial trouble and help them out. And Jennifer, no, she, you know, her contribution, though, is on the Dolly label.
Right. She's Dolly forever.
That's right. That's right. And so she has, you know, it's just the time. And she actually graduated, when I said, you know, from Florida Southern, and she had a degree in communications. So she did very well in PR until her children were on the way.
But citrus is in their blood, I can tell you.
It's in their blood.
It's in their history.
It's in their history.
And it's part of their life.
They love talking about it. And Allison, as you know, because she and Ann were friends from high school, and she loves talking about the groves. And, you know, she moved to California, and she's had a great success out there in PR. But yes, they all three very interested in citrus and the old times when we talk about it.
Yeah. Well, we know how important citrus was, and we know how wonderful it is to visit and everything else. We're going to wrap up. We're going to finish, and you and I can go over some of this stuff. But anyway, I want to tell you how fantastic it's been to have you share with us and the perspective that you have and everything. So we'll get it up. Gus does a great job of editing. He'll have this thing posted. You'll be a movie star soon.
A movie star,
Thank
I'm
you,
sure.
Ann.
Thank you. I've loved it. It's been great.
So.
Yeah.